Douglas, I want to thank you for coming out on all of a sudden a night where Mother Nature threw us a little curveball. It's weather, and weather is always kind, but whenever you have a meeting, weather always raises its potential situation for the evening. But in general, we have a lot to cover tonight, but at first I wanted to start off with a few introductions as others are coming in. This wouldn't be possible without a forward-thinking Board of Education. And this isn't a Board of Education meeting night, but our board members are here, those that could make it tonight, and in the future we will have a lot more meetings where they will be formal board meetings seeking public input. But tonight I'd like to recognize, if they could just stand so they can be recognized, our President of the Board of Education, Ms. Pam Strollo, our Vice President of the Board of Education, Mr. Brian Lynch, also some of our members of the Board of Education, Ms. Karen Boulis right up front, Ms. Christine Dale right back there in the back, and some may have to leave throughout the night, as well as Mr. Dan Christmas, and I see just coming in Miss Christensen, Lisa Christensen also. So I know some of the other members may come in, and if I can, I'll try to catch them. But throughout the time that most of these members have been on the Board of Education, they've had to go through many different trials and tribulations. So it's kind of hard to think that we're here talking about this in a way tonight, but it's also something that's probably been long overdue with some of the discussions. And why we're here tonight, I want to thank the administrative team that is coming out for the support of this, because they're going to do a lot of the bulk of the work. But also, I want to recognize our project manager from Hunt Architecture, Mr. Chad Snowberg, who's here. And then also, there's sort of communication specialist, Ms. Sarah George, who's helped with this evening, as well as our communication specialist, Ms. Susan Parazzolo. Without these two, I would still be working on this presentation tonight, so thank you very much. We're here to talk about Horseheads 2030. And I went home for dinner tonight, and my wife said, you know, I heard some people saying, well, I don't care about 2030, I care about right now. But that's an important question, because it's a question we have to answer and make sure people understand. So the question is, what is Horseheads 2030? We've started to describe it in the beginning of the year through our communications, but we really want to take some time to make sure people understand that Horseheads 2030 is really a comprehensive project to take a look and improve both, and I mean both, our educational program as well as the overall physical infrastructure of the district. That's important because we're lucky enough that we may have to look at our infrastructure at the same time that we can look and say, what do we want for our education for Horseheads, as well as the Horseheads community, as well as the Twin Tier region educationally. So when you think of 2030, how did the name develop? Well, this is a wonderful picture, time appropriate, of course, in 2016, of our students that are in our pre-kindergarten class. And if you follow the pre-kindergarten class all the way through their educational career, they graduate in 2030. So it makes a little sense, because when they become kindergarten students, they still graduate in 2030, and that's the first time they are officially students in a public school, and not just the pre-kindergarten program, which is also supported by the public school. So when you look at that, Horseheads 2030 is not just about where we're at in 2030, but it's where we go along the way to get to 2030. It's about impacting our current students and our future students and the residents of this district and the environment in which they live and thrive. So hopefully the name, if you can, please sort of bear out and be witness to the community why we are calling it this and why it's so important for all of us now and going into the future. You know, one of the questions we get asked, well, who's going to be represented by Horseheads 2030? Well, it's really representative of all of our stakeholders. The question is, sometimes people aren't sure who they are. Our students are our stakeholders. They're probably some of our most important aspects of our educational program, but we also want to have our students become so highly involved in the global marketplace, but they bring that global world back here to Horseheads and also invest in our community in the future. In addition, it's the parents, those with children in the district, but it's also those parents that may not have children in our schools any longer or have yet to think about having children in our schools, if you understand what I mean. So when you look at it, it's also about our teachers, our support staff, our administration. Because no matter what, when you think about the African proverb, it takes a whole village to educate. And every one of those stakeholders is important. It also takes all of our community members, because some are vested in our schools and some are not necessarily vested close to our schools. We always have the discussion about property owners and non-property owners. Well, in one way or another, we're all involved in this process, whether it's educationally, whether it's support, or whether it's financial. And it's our senior citizens as well as our young people, or our students. Because no matter what, it's the whole community together that makes up the Horseheads Central School District. It's also our local and regional businesses. Horseheads wouldn't be here without the infrastructure around the whole community. It's part of Corning, it's part of Elmira, it's part of Elmira Heights, it's part of Watkins Glen, it's part of the Twin Tiers. But we want to make sure that those stakeholders are heard from. And some people may ask, why would we want to do that as just sort of Horseheads? Well, we're all interconnected in one way or another. And the more we connect, the more we make our school the centerpiece of everyone, the easier it is for us to entice people to make that investment. And it is the largest investment for education. Then it's also all of our municipalities, whether you're in the town of Erin, town of Big Flats, town of Catlett, town of Horseheads, village of Horseheads, town of Elmira Heights, town of Elmira. All of those are interrelated to this district one way or another. So they're a stakeholder. And also, to help drive the message home, it's also our elected officials, whether it's for the municipalities or for our state government. We need to entice them to understand why Horseheads should be the center interest for not only them, but to make things happen for this community. So when we look at who represents Horseheads, simply put, you can see it by the pictures. Whether it's students, whether it's members of our community, whether it's members of BOCES, members of the businesses and trade organizations, our seniors, our youngest students, business operations, whether they're Fortune 500 or small business owners, whether it's the local youth program, the local senior citizen program, we have to make sure that we look at our community as one big entity serving the best interest to make Horseheads the premier place for everyone to wish to reside. So as you can see, we have our businesses, we have our local students, our museums, we have our veterans, we have our senior citizens, we have our parents, we have our young people, we have our seniors. It's about all of the stakeholders coming together, and practically it's about everyone. So that you understand, there's a brief history of what's been going on in the school and the school district. If you really go back, most of the schools went through the great sort of consolidation effort in the 40s and 50s. And in the 50s here, Horseheads took 36 small school districts and created the overall Horseheads Central School District at that time. With that comes a lot of growth, a lot of building, and a lot of initiatives to make sure you plan through the future. In 54, Big Flats, Center Street, Ridge Road, as well as some cafeterias and gym was built at the high school. And those buildings are still here today. Did I hit? I went too fast, okay. In 63, the junior high school was built on Center Street, which is the south building at that point. So you have the north and the south and Center Street. Then additionally, in 66, the newest elementary school was built. And that just turned 50 years young last year. And that's Gardner Road. In 69, the Sing Sing Road complex was built, which that is, I think, at the time, the junior high west, as well as an elementary school for Sing Sing. Notice, most of the same infrastructure from 40, 50, and even 60 years ago is still currently in place. Now think about that, sort of like your house. If you had a 60-year-old house, you've been through renovations, remodels, repair, and upkeep. Schools have to do the same. In '87, notice there was a long span, there wasn't much that was going on in the form of infrastructure. But here at the high school, north and south campuses were sort of linked together, and that's why we call it the link. In 2000, 2003, you saw a little growth with the middle school field house, the middle school, intermediate school field house addition. But how many people would understand or remember that that's close to 16, almost 17 years old now? Most floors only last 15 years. And guess what? We're in the process of replacing that already through our educational budget. 2006, you're sitting in an auditorium that's been renovated. But over 10 years ago, the renovations, as I was just talking to the department chair for the music department, now that we've brought them back, and some of the music teachers are starting to show significant signs of wear and outdatedness in just a matter of 10 years for what we utilize it for. But it shouldn't be about just what we utilize it. It's about how we utilize it for education, and then how we also open up this hub for the entire community. When you look at it, since 2006, right now, one of the projects that we're getting ready to get started on was only because the state passed a bond that will allow all schools to have a certain amount of technology infrastructure upgrade. But at the same time, we're also upgrading a softball field at the intermediate middle school complex because we sold the school where our softball field was, and we have to replace it and make sure that it's on property. So in general, that's all the historical look, but remember when I was talking to you about we're about to replace the field house floor because we need to upkeep it? That upkeep comes from annual expenditures in our budget for capital projects. And that's about $1 million a year that should really be going for our educational program, that we withdraw from the educational program just to keep everything looking as best we can. We have an outstanding facilities staff, an outstanding custodial staff that really does a wonderful job of trying to keep the buildings as modern and current and up to date and as safe as possible. But if you look at it as $1 million, and everybody will say $1 million is a lot, but you know the adage, a dollar just doesn't go as far as a dollar used to? Well, at the time when we were talking about dollars, $1 million was tremendously a lot of money. Nowadays, $1 million doesn't go as far as it used to, especially when you're dealing with an $80 million budget and at least I think a value of a $56 million infrastructure. So keep that in mind as we're talking about it, but that's the big thing. We, as well as the board, are trying annually to make sure we have the money that we need to keep ourselves going the best way we can. And that sort of caused the need for having this discussion and opening up the possibilities of a major capital project. So the question is where will Horseheads 2030 take place? Is it just going to be here at the high school? Is it just going to be athletic fields? No, it's not. As you see, it's all over. It's the buildings, it's transportation, it's the high school south, high school north, it's the high school main entrance, and as you look at it, then you've got the Sing Sing complex, intermediate school, you have Center Street, you have the high school, you have athletic fields. I mean, as you look at it, we're not trying to show you the pictures that would really make it look like we're in the worst light, but the one picture I put up here, just so that you know, because the controversy can be, well, we understand it for education, why do we need to do athletic fields? We already have this. Well, we have over 79 athletic competition teams, and we have very limited space to be able to operate. This one field up here, this is the back of the high school. Now, this is at the end of a season. Normal wear and tear is what you see here on one of the soccer fields. This other wear and tear, it looks like wear and tear. It actually isn't wear and tear. It's a little pest, and it's called a grub. And those issues cost a lot of man hours, a lot of detail, and a lot of repair. Those are the upkeeps. And again, I can tell you right now from where that field is, I have every confidence Mike Coughlin and the entire facilities department, they will get that close to being absolutely ready. But that means we have 2 fields and now we're down to 1. And if we can't get it ready, we still only have 1. We have some at the middle school, we have some all over the district. But each thing comes with a cost and a price. And that's one of the things that through a capital project, we have to try to do the best job for the board, the best job for the community, in developing the best plan with the best financial plan for the entire district to emphasize why come to Horseheads. It isn't about athletics, it isn't about the building, it's about everything. Whether it's education in our classroom size, our classroom, our class size is about average. 23, 24, 25, across the state has been average for the number of kids in rooms. What's not average is when you have a 700 square foot classroom with 25 kids. State recommendation is right around 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. Well, that's current building recommendations, not when our buildings were built. As you know, when you renovate anything at home, you have to come current with code. I can tell you, if you've been in our elementary schools and you've seen an elementary bathroom, they're no longer current with code, so when we have to update them, they have significant costs for code updates that we would have to do. And we can't get around it. Once we touch it, we must adhere to it. So these are some of the discussions, whether it's elementary, whether it's intermediate school, whether it's middle school, whether it's high school, whether it's transportation, whether it's our food service department, whether it's facilities, maintenance and grounds, whether it's the district office. We have to look at everything to build the best infrastructure and also put together a plan that this infrastructure and the funding for this infrastructure starts to take care of the district on its own. And I'll explain that a little later and definitely further in the process as we go forward. Now, why is Horseheads 2030 critical at this point? There's several reasons, but we're going to try to hit a couple. But you may even also know of some that we haven't identified. Every school district in New York State is required to report to the state now, every 5 years, the conditions of their buildings and property. That's what's known as a building condition survey. And Horseheads has done 2. What happens is that when left unaddressed, the building condition survey can actually grow. And currently, Hunt Architecture had to go through every one of our buildings, trying to crawl and see every nook and cranny that they could. Whether it was in the basement, whether it was in a crawl space, whether it was up on our roofs, whether it was behind our walls, as much as they could, they had to go through and start to identify everything. And that's known as the Building Condition Survey. And they identified over $159 million in needed repairs for the district, for all of our buildings. Now, just so that you get a scope, we have to use the top number. The reason being is whenever you do a building project, they've actually identified about $105 million of items and repairs. But in order to do that amount of money, we also have to add the additional costs that are not part of the construction, but are part of how we have to do business. We have to have architects, and they have a fee. We have to have construction managers, they have a fee. We have to be able to understand that we may have to pay for something that's undiscoverable. In other words, they never saw it, we never saw it, and all of a sudden, you start building, and there's the problem. Anyone ever do a home renovation where all of a sudden you break into a wall and the contractor says, oh, that's going to cost another $1,500 to $2,000. When you're talking with schools, you can be talking $500, you can be talking $50,000. So we have to prepare. And the state normal operating procedure is that whatever you have in construction costs, you're using about a 45% addition for that cost overruns, contingencies, contracts, fees, and undiscoverables. So that's why that number is at $159 million. Now, in that number, there are things that are needs but they're also wants. And that's some of the things that we have to talk about. Because we may have identified some things that maybe we didn't identify what your want is for the community. That's the next 4 to 5 months of the discussion. So when you look at it, we want to be as open and transparent about it. On our website, and we've included the URL address up here, is the actual BCS. You can go on, you can go through. I will tell you, it's an extensive document. I can't bring the book because if I brought the book, it's about a 5-inch binder. It's got photos of what's the issue, estimated costs, and I will tell you, don't think that just the costs in the book or on the website are the actual costs. Those are estimated costs, and they're as conservative as they can be, but they were costs that were put in over a year ago. What happens to prices each year? They tend to go up. So that's one of the other critical reasons why we have to address this. So when you look at the BCS, you can see that it will identify different pictures, such as if concrete's having a problem where a concrete walkway has to be replaced because it's raised, if there's corrosion or other issues on the door. If you're looking at it and there's structural issues, this may be simply, oh, you just have to put up more tiles. Well, if you don't have the tiles, yes, we can put up any old tile, but if there's actually a problem with the mastic adhering, we've got to address it because those won't be the only tiles that come off. Has anybody ever been to Guthrie's new hospital? You've seen all the netting around it? They have an adhesion problem. That's a construction issue. I feel sorry for whoever did it because I imagine they're going to be talking about it. But those are the things that happen over time. If you look up in this auditorium, can everybody see that round spot up there? Anybody know what it is? Probably a water leak and a fix. But that deals with our roofing. This is 10 years old. Almost every single roof in the district is at the end or past its lifespan. So when we continue, you've got terrazzo floors that are cracked, become safety hazards, we've got to repair those. Each has a cost. We have ceilings, but the biggest hidden unknown that we have here right now is asbestos. And no matter what, asbestos comes with a pretty hefty price tag when we're dealing with the fact that we may have to disturb it. So all of these are actions, and here's a picture, you can't see it as well, but we have all of our roofs and water's pooling on the roofs. So those are things that are not easy fixes, but they're also not the glamorous fixes that people want to hear about. We know we have to, when our roof is 25 years old and we have to re-roof it, we hate spending the money for it, but we also know if we don't, the rest of the infrastructure could possibly start to deteriorate or rot. And we've got to make sure that we live up to that, to the expectations, so that it's not about 2030. It's about next year, the year after that, and even 2040, 2050, making sure that we have a solid infrastructure. Again, other shots of the field, that's the same thing I was telling you about earlier. So why else is Horseheads 2030 critical? The operations and equipment are nearing the end or past their lifespan. You heard me just say that. Well, we're just going to take just a small example for tonight, just for the purpose of discussion, about this building, High School North. If you think about it, here's some of the lifespans for our boiler system, our mechanical systems that are in the building, lighting, and roofing. You notice, the average lifespan for a boiler is about 30 years. Ours is over 63 years old. The average mechanical lifespan is about 15. We're about 31. Lighting, 10 to 15 years. We're already over 20 plus. Do you know how much energy consumption has changed in that same time period? When we're talking about roofing, I just mentioned about our roofing, ours is at 15 to 20 years for flat roofs. Here's the difference. The district, now, we're at 30. People would say, well, why didn't you come to us 10 years ago? The district tried to address this through its best financial plan. And remember, 10 years ago, you're starting to get ready to go through the recession. You didn't know it was coming. But the district at that time tried to address some of the roofs with a polymer additive to extend the warranty life. And you know what? It extended it by about 10 years. Well, even if it extended it at 10 years, we're now coming to the end. And what we're experiencing is that simpler fix at a cheaper amount back then, because it's a polymer, over time, this polymer is starting to shrink. And it's causing other problems that were unforeseen at that time. It's nobody's fault. It's just, how do you try to get the best bang for the buck? And I would tell you, like I said, this man right here just drove back from Albany because he's talking about this every day, about how we can do our best job with Albany to get the best resources for you. But he deals with it every day, that no matter what, we're going to have to address some roofs even before we get started with any project. But that's just showing you the lifespan. It can go on, and we're not trying to scare anybody. We're just trying to tell you the truth behind the data of the BCS. So why else is Horseheads 2030 critical? Well, you all know, Horseheads has always been seen as the premier district in the region. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, Horseheads has always been known for having the best education, the best facilities, and the best communities to live in. And people moved here and actually chose Horseheads over other places. You have to look at that because back then, all the facilities and stuff were new. The education was very strong. And even now, the education is still strong. We're going to have to go through some educational discussions because we want it even stronger. And I think the teachers do, I think the community does. I mean, there's other things that we may have to look at the state and say, the heck with what you're saying at the state, we're going to do what's right for Horseheads, we're going to do what's right for this community and our children and the future of those children possibly in our area. But when you do it, a lot of things have been happening to keep us one of those leaders in all of this and make us number one. We have to look at student successes or scholarship opportunities out there. After all, our product is to try to do the best for our students and improve the overall economy of the district. We look at our achievement, the excellence that we have in the district, but we also look at trying to make sure our grads return to the area if possible. And if they want to, but we also want to entice them here. We also are a district of choice for families, for teachers, but also for new residents. We want to make sure that that continues. And I will tell you, personally being here over a year, we're starting to be challenged very drastically in some of those areas. And that means the economic indicators could shift for the district just like that, and we want to make sure that we protect that, because that protects your investment, that protects your home, that protects the community, and that's why we're having these discussions. Another reason why Horseheads 2030 is critical is we must be able to provide the best education possible, not only for our children in times of changing educational demands, but we want to do it because there's a lot of things going on. We have the reform agenda. We have global education. We're constantly talking about global initiatives. But not only globally, we want to talk about how global affects this area. How do we bring it back here? We have a Fortune 500 company right in the area. We've got several that are connected to other Fortune 500 companies. But notice, when we talk about it, education is changing from when a lot of us went to school. We are more project-based. We are more hands-on. We have a technology more that's centered around STEM education or STEAM education or STREAM. Now, some of you may say, what the heck is he talking about? STEM education, for the most part, is we've shifted into a highly technical field. STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math focus. Now, if you add the word A to it, it becomes STEAM. That's adding science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Well, if you notice, a lot of those are all practical application types of careers and fields. That doesn't mean English is not important, that doesn't mean social studies isn't important, and so forth. They build the foundation for all of those activities to occur. And then you have STREAM. STREAM is the newest one because it's heavily built on that R. And the R is research. So that you have science, technology, research, engineering, arts, and math. All of those are the practical applications, but they start to form the educational knowledge base of what makes changes in communities, regions, as well as the global marketplace. So these are also critical reasons. So one of the things is, we need an infrastructure for excellence, key programs in math, science, language, technology, the arts, as well as all other areas necessary for our students to compete in the global marketplace. Where the most important thing, anything is possible. But we have to make sure nothing hinders that path. That's why we've showed you these slides, because these are some of the technology fields that are out there. Just imagine, we have a Fortune 500 company, but we have no educational program that deals with really glass technologies, or glass manufacturing, glass engineering. But yet, in this community alone, 17 to 20% of our community works for that Fortune 500 company. And yet, the closest school that we have, I think, is Alfred University, that has glass technology base for some of their educational programs. If we want our area to thrive, we've got to reach out not only to the Cornings, but to the Hilliards, the Alstroms. Sikorsky's gone. But we've got to make it so that this technology-based center is a place where people want to come. And we have a great investment in the I-86 corridor investment. That's the $500 million for the southern tier. Well, Horseheads is central to that whole development for the I-86 corridor in this area. Our schools have to be the enticement for people to want to locate here too. And that is something that we have to have a conversation about and talk about, so that we can make anything possible, not only for our students, but for our community and for the future of the area. You need to know what we've done so far, because we can't just start at one point. We've had to do a lot just to lead up to this point. But we started talking about this at the beginning with the Summer District newsletter, sort of throwing out there a little morsel here, a little morsel there. And now we had the invitation for tonight's meeting. Well, this is sort of the kickoff, and we purposely chose right between the holidays, because there's no good time to start anything once you get after the holidays, but we needed to break the ice and start having the discussion. And I would tell you, I'm very pleased by the number of people that have come out. You never know how many people you're going to get, especially on a weather night like tonight. But I want to thank you for at least making this a priority and important in the discussion. And I hope you will be the many facets that will go out and entice others. We went through a merger vote. We went through a consolidation study. And a lot of the consolidation study really led to this. Because we didn't close 4 elementary schools. The board got down to that position. We didn't close 2 elementary schools. They chose one of the options called the green option. But that wasn't a do-nothing option. That still had a cost of about $159 million to move the district forward. And that was the BCS. So that's what we've done so far leading up to it. As well as to discuss that, we had to put out a request for a proposal to get the best deal for Horseheads, also get the best caliber candidate. And we ended up selecting Hunt Architecture, who happens to also be locally centered. That wasn't our motivation. We went through 3 weeks of exhausting interviews, checks, and discussions and design concepts to get to our selection. Hunt ended up being the architect firm of choice. That took about two to 3 months just to get there. We're currently going through another process that, although I have the conversations, we constantly have these conversations out, but I don't get as many people as this at those conversations. I'm hoping that this will help pick up some of that. So that's where we've been talking about since 2030. And then we've already started having some initial construction scopes with our administrators. We have to start somewhere. They were the closest. Our next process with them is actually now with the principals, with our newly reinstated grade level chairs and department chairs, because they will be the instructional leaders and our point of contact with our entire instructional staff. So we're trying to make sure everybody's inclusive, as well as all of our stakeholders are always welcome at these events, because this is the open forum where we can get more people involved in a quicker way to hear everybody's concerns. And then we're actually in the process right now, wrapping up, of asking for requests for proposals from construction management groups. Because when we're doing a project this big, or even a smaller project, part of this, it's going to be big. We want to have the best tools for the Board of Education, for myself as an administrator, for my construction team, for the architect, to make sure that we try to do the best job for any project planning, development, and implementation. I have a history of doing, I've done over 4 major capital projects. Every one of them was done on time, under budget, or on budget. Most of them are on budget because you can always find things that you need to spend it on, the money on, in regards to the things that maybe you didn't put in the project, and now you have a little bit of money to take care of those items. Well, what happens is that takes a lot of planning and effort. It also takes a lot of transparency and discussions at the board meetings out in the community, and being willing to answer all those questions. That's what a construction manager helps us do. What's the tentative timeline? Well, right now, interest rates are getting ready to start moving. So it is imperative, if we are going to do something as a community, and you're the only ones that can decide. We can only plan, the board can only propose, the community decides. That timeline has to be relatively quickly, just because of the fact that we have to try to take advantage of some debt that's coming off, that we could try to use that debt retirement to help pay for any projects that we have in the future, so we don't have to go as much back to the tax base as possible. So when you look at the timeline, right now what we're looking at is we're going to have ongoing infrastructure discussions with stakeholders and Board of Education, pretty much starting in January, going through April and May. In addition, we're going to have to start having Board of Education discussions with stakeholders about what do we want for our educational program. We already have wonderful programming, but there's other opportunities out there. When I talked about that engineering focus on possibly glass technology, well, it could be about machinist technology. It could be other things that we aren't thinking of. It's why the community coming together is important to have some of those discussions for the overall community in the Twin Tiers. And during that same time frame, we're going to be working through committees like this, or open committees, as well as internally with the Board of Education, about developing the architectural concepts and the scope of any possible development of the project. In June to July, we will have to start sort of shaping that into the actual presentation of the developed project for the Board of Education, because there are certain timelines we would have to meet. We have to meet so much of a voting threshold timeline, no different than we have to do with the annual budget. So June, July looks like about the best time to start bringing it to the board, so that by August, hopefully the board would be comfortable enough that they could tentatively adopt a proposed project. And at that point, roughly 45 days after that adoption, then we would end up going out to a tentative public vote on any project. And that would be somewhere around mid to late October, early to mid-November. That's probably the right time because, again, you start getting into the holiday seasons, you also want to make sure that everybody's available for that vote, and you also don't want to get into the next budget season just because of the fact you're trying to balance so many issues that are going on at one time. Make a decision, move forward, redevelop the budget, make a decision, move forward. That's the life of public schools. Remember, we're the only entity that is absolutely pretty much required to go to the public for its approval. No other budget does that in the state of New York. No other municipality has the opportunity to go and ask you, is it okay to levy an increased tax? And remember, sometimes we levy an increase in taxes and the tax actually goes down. Such as last year when we actually had approval for a negative 0.05 tax deduction levy. Does everyone remember that? That's a good thing. But ultimately, when the value of the district rose during that time, it actually grew from a negative 0.05 levy to a negative 1.45% levy. In other words, we reduced taxes last year, and nobody knows it really because they'll pay attention at the tax bill time, but taxes actually, the rate went down by 1.45%. That same amount could almost pay for some parts of this project. But that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to say, we're trying as good stewards as the board, administration, faculty and staff, trying to be good stewards and doing what we need to do to make Horseheads prosper. Now, the biggest question, what's the money picture? How's this going to be financed? It's still too early to say exactly what the cost would be and how we'd actually break it down, but most likely with 159 million, we could propose one whole big project and say, well, we're going to use this debt out here and we're going to use this debt out here so that you don't have to pay for it, and there might be a little bit of tax, but we'll use that to offset. That can get confusing. So we look at it as we may end up doing more of maybe 2 or 3 projects over a 6 or 7 year period that we would have to come to maybe 2 or 3 times potentially to ask approval. And it's like going through this, but really you go through it once and then you're reminded that we've already gone through this, we're phasing it and so forth. Or the board could say, and that's where the board's going to have to hear from you in discussions, that says maybe we do want to do that so that go to one big project, get it all approved, know how to pay for it, but to make sure that the community doesn't have to come out 2 or 3 different times. Those are discussions we're going to have, but you're part of that discussion. In addition, when we're looking at these 2 or 3 projects, the reason why we're separating the project potentially into phases is to meet the BCS recommendations of 159 million, but also by being good stewards of the district's finances and trying to get the best value for you when we plan out any project. Additionally, we want to have time to make sure that to do this, we collaborate with our fiscal advisors, which we had a meeting today, and they did advise us that we are in probably one of the best financial positions to be able to do something of this scale and caliber. We just have to make sure that we properly develop it, discuss it, and then research the financial costs with the state as we finalize the project to make sure that we give you the most accurate numbers. And then we're in the process designed to create future tax impacts and keep them as minimal as possible. That's the most important thing. Imagine, hypothetically, if right now I could tell you, I've met with financial advisors, and I could do 159 million, renovate all the schools, take care of the BCS, and it would have no tax impact to you. Doesn't that sound better than if it had like a 30 or 45% tax increase, which it doesn't, but that obviously our job is really to work to try to minimize that as much as possible for you and get you the best deal possible to make sure that your economic investment in your home and property in the district not only stabilizes, but potentially increases, because you all know the way your schools go, the way your community involvement goes, so goes your property values and the economic indicators in your community. So that's why we're having these discussions. Our job, and I will tell you from the bottom of my heart, and I know it's the board's expectation too, we are to develop the best possible financial package for the district to overcome the hurdles of the past. So, let me tell you a little about where the money can actually come from. Right off the bat, any project we do that gets voter approval will receive roughly about 80 to 80.3%, I think is the number, of state aid. Now, why is that number important? How many people went to the store today and bought a holiday present or bought some clothing or materials? Because we all know we pay taxes on it, correct? And where does that tax money go? Some goes to the county, but a vast majority of it goes to the state. And every year, school districts and other municipalities or state municipalities constantly do building and addition. They get money from Horseheads to do their buildings in Long Island, to do the building in Corning for Corning Central Schools, to do the building in Elmira or Watkins Glen or Pittsburgh. The reason I say that is state aid, no matter what, we all pay for everybody in the state. State aid is how we get the rest of the 12 million people in New York State to help Horseheads out. It includes some of our money too. But the vast majority is coming from the entire state and across the state. That's where that 80% comes. Don't you think it's about time over 50, 60 years that you're starting to get the same amount of money coming into Horseheads that's been going into our neighboring district? Right now, currently, you look at Elmira, they've spent in the past probably 10 years close to around $200 million renovating and changing their schools. Doesn't mean we have to be like Elmira. Corning has done around $150 million, and they plan to do a little bit more. In the past 10 years, we've done around $18 million. That doesn't mean we're keeping up just to keep up with the money, but their infrastructure is much farther ahead than ours. Their educational opportunities are starting to grow, especially in Corning. This is not a competition between Horseheads and Corning. It is a competition about us with the rest of the state. And I would, as a superintendent, be wrong if I didn't say, I want to bring some of the state money here that you've given over 60 years to support everybody else, to make sure it comes home to vastly support your needs here, your students' needs, and most importantly, your future. Now, in addition, the Board of Education over the past decade and even longer have been great stewards of the money. They have taken the money and they have put it away. This past year, we've fully funded the capital reserve to try to start straightening out our cash liquidity with our one-time use money. That means you've contributed one way or another in the form of taxes, right? It doesn't mean we don't need it. We still need it in our annual budget, but when we have budget savings, we need to put it into a savings account so we reinvest it for you. Right now, in any project, say I'll just use the 159 million because that's what we've talked about. Right off the bat, we can already take 159 and say we're doing all of it, and it goes to 149 because we have $10 million right off the bat. We also have what's known as a capital reserve, so we intend to use that. I think the board would, but we can't use it unless you approve the use of it. Again, it all comes down to your approval. Now, the second line, debt retirement. This is the most complicated and can be the hardest to understand. So let me start off like this. Everybody, when you buy a car, you have a certain monthly debt. Okay, and say it's $200 a month for 4 years. You've been paying for that car, but at the end of that 4 years, that car is starting to see some wear and tear, and you say, I want a new car. But you don't have another $300 for that new car. But you just paid off your old car. So you just retired some debt. You can actually go and buy another car and use that $200 to buy that new car and then add an extra $100 a month to that payment, and you're in that upgraded state. In a way, that's what debt retirement is in a school. We will have some debt coming off in 2017, 2018, and in order to use the debt in the year for a project, you have to vote on the project in that year, and that's why October is that critical time. But we can use that debt retirement. That helps us annually pay, and in this first case, we have a certain amount of money that will come off that debt that we will be able to use, just like that $10 million, to offset the local amount. And then, if that's not enough, then you have to look at your local contribution. Depending on the project, it could be 0% tax levy, which is the best situation, or there could be an unknown. We don't know what that calculation is. But I can tell you, we will try to keep it as minimal as possible. The big thing is 1% of a tax levy for construction would be 17 cents per thousand. In other words, if you had a $100,000 valued home, 1% tax levy would mean $17 additional a year you would have to pay for that levy. If it was 2%, it would be $34 for a $100,000 home. 3%, $51 for a $100,000 home. 4%, $68 a year for a $100,000 home. Even at 4%, $68 on a $100,000 home is just a little more than $1 a week. It's less than about 18 to 25 cents a day for the whole year for 15 years. Now you have to, in my mind, you have to keep that as a balance and try to make sure that you're trying not to take any money from someone else. But if you have to, you want to try to put it in perspective, because the value you get out of it should meet your expectations. So those are the ways that we finance something. There's also ways after we finance that we can try to explore ways of getting a better deal for the district, such as energy performance contracting. We want to save money by energy. There's some things in our project we might be able to do through energy performance contracting, which means companies will pay us to do that work. We will see savings from that in the form of state aid to pay it off, so it never comes from you. And we also get energy savings as well that could be potential revenue sources for a slight time for the district. It always sounds too good to be true, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it is a viable product to be able to expand our buying power as a district. In addition, there are possible rebates out there. There are grants that we can seek. They don't necessarily lower the cost, but they can also allow us to do some of the items within the BCS or beyond or in our educational program. As well as there's E-rate, which is an electronic rate, or it's actually a federal government rate that we get on some of our technology purchasing. And I know, where's Greg? Oh, Greg's right there, he's standing right in front of me. Greg maximizes that for the district as best possible. So we want to take advantage of that so that maybe we don't have to spend project money on items that we could cover with money that we get from the federal government. And then there's other resources, such as donations or sponsorship. It all depends if the district wishes to go that way, because those tend to bog down a little with the legal position that you have to go through. Next steps, we have to secure the facilitators to set a schedule and begin community-wide educational discussions. Tonight, when you leave, we're going to have a couple people out in the hall. If you wish to be part of those discussions, I know a lot of our educators will be, but I also want community members part of those discussions on what's best for the district. Where do we want to go? What do we want to see educationally? What do you think should be starting the focus of our educational programs? Not just what the state says, but what do we think is best for Horseheads and the community? We also want to have continued discussions at my monthly meetings. The reason being is a lot of those concepts and ideals, people sometimes don't want to talk at the groups, but they'll talk more individually, and that's good too. We also have to continue development of the construction scope with all stakeholders, so that's going to be ongoing. And when we have these meetings, please bring a friend or somebody that you know. Even if you can't come, this is being videotaped for you, for your friend. Oh, I didn't get a chance. Could you tell me? Hey, you can go see it online. I talk a lot. I have to. There's a lot of information to get through, but you can fast forward and click through some of the items that you may have already heard, because it's always going to be tracked like we did with our merger study online for your convenience. Again, open and transparent format. We're going to complete an RFP to hire a construction manager. That should be done by the end of January. And then the biggest thing is, like I said, the posting the videos, the website. We're just trying to do the best for the district that we can, and I hope you appreciate that. So for more information and to keep up to date, we just wanted to let you know that we've devised a little portion of our website. This isn't working very well. That basically has our logo. So you click there, it's going to take you to the avenues of the URL for the BCS, the presentations, the actual hard copy of the presentation that you can print out if you needed to, as well as any information that we load to it throughout the entire process. And then obviously, you have the URLs here. We do have a handout that will be out in the vestibule, which allows you to take some of that information home so that you don't have to write anything else, or also go to the website just to copy it down. So basically, that's a little bit about what Horseheads 2030 is. I know it takes a little while to go through all of it, but tonight's really about you now. This is a time where we won't necessarily answer a lot of the questions. We'll give you some brief answers, but we have wonderful assistants that are going to be taking down the questions, because that's how we're going to develop them for the question and answer portion of the website. We have the video as well, and it's really about starting to hear from you. So we wanted to make this time. We have two mics over here. I believe, Chris, they're hot mics. So when you come up, all you have to do is, if you could, just state your name in case we have to clarify anything on the video, and state your question, or even a statement, or anything you want us to know, or any consideration you want us to give at this point. So I'll leave it to you.
My name is Joe Atkinson. I'm one of the members of the original Facilities Utilization Committee that boiled down all the scenarios of what was going to be closed and whatever. I think a lot of people don't know, what does the term stakeholder mean? Who are the stakeholders that are going to be in these discussions?
Well, I think, okay, came back on. With stakeholders, we really mean it's everyone that wants to come out, because when we have these meetings, Joe, it's for anybody that wants to fill these seats, because we're not here just to say what we're going to do. We're also here to answer the questions and listen to some of the things that are on people's minds about the project itself or anything that's going on in the district, but in this format, obviously, about the project. When we're talking about the educational component, we're actually talking about individuals that want to talk about, where does Horseheads go educationally? I can't tell you whether IB is the right thing, whether AP, whether ACE courses are always the right thing, or whether they can all coexist. But some people want one thing, some people want another. The only way we can find out is by inviting people to the table, whether it's students, parents, business members, community members, seniors, veterans. It's anybody that is a viable member of this community. It's also members of our business community that may not be residents of Horseheads, but do business here in Horseheads, or want Horseheads to come into their business. So that's what I would say, sort of like what the slide said earlier. Please don't be shy.
I'm not shy. I'm Dennis Kingsley, and I'm a resident of Horseheads. I'm Dennis Kingsley, I'm a resident of Horseheads. I have a question. We spent a lot of time on infrastructure here. How is this going to dovetail with the curriculum that you're proposing, particularly if you've read, like Tom Friedman's new book, that the world is going at an accelerated pace and change is happening at a very rapid way going about things. How is this facility going to dovetail with the curriculum, and how nimble are you going to be with curriculum and instructional changes that are being 14 years into the future?
It's actually a very good question, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking at merging some of our discussions educationally with the business community, as well as we have to look educationally. But I will answer the question as honestly as I can. We can never keep up with the nimblization of the global marketplace at this point. Schools are not the factories to be able to do that, because we can't retool that quickly. So when we're doing this, we have to have the discussion about the infrastructure, because that's got to move on, because that's a time path. But when we do it, remember, we're going to conceptually develop a potential project, but then even if the voters approve the conceptualization, we still have to design it over the next year. Well, concurrently, we're having our discussions about some of the things that we want to see educationally, so that when we hit that design phase, the education piece may have to alter some of our construction infrastructure piece. That's as nimble as I think a school district can be. There's no guarantee. But that's why it's important that, I said earlier, we do care about the global marketplace, but we sort of have to look at home and see what we want for here as the community too. Because whether it's in technologies, whether it's in communications, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in just the average general occupations that we deal with every single day in our own professional or personal lives, all of those are opportunities for the education. We formed the foundation of which people will springboard off and make anything possible. That's the best I can answer with that. But it's something that we'll also take back and have more discussions, because the two need to be as much interrelated as they can be. Timing sometimes works differently on that. Did I get that close? Others. I also have my team here, so if I can't answer, I'll let them, and so forth. What do you think, if I ask you, In your own personal situation, do you already know something about the district that you think is of critical importance that needs to be done? Does anybody have already a formulated thought of something that we need to do, maybe need to do that I haven't talked about? Just by a show of hands, do you think you know something we need to do? We got a shy crowd. There's one. That's good, great. But what happens is it's a very personal decision. We've got to make it as district-wide as possible. And the only way we can do it is by talking and also listening. So others, please, there's a mic over here as well. I got my next door neighbor over there. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten up and said something as well. But he works for us. We will have many opportunities. I have to talk to the Board of Education. There's a communication program out there right now that we can possibly avail ourselves of that will help you potentially ask questions a little easier from your computer. And what happens is, when you ask the question, we answer to everyone. That's really the benefit of it, because sometimes in these formats, people don't know how, or they also may not want to get up in front of the audience. It was funny because during the merger vote, everybody from Elmira Heights wanted to get up and talk. Some people from Central Square got up, I'm thinking of another merger today, but some people from Horseheads got up and talked too. But always, when I was out, people would come more and more comfortable in small units. So I certainly understand that. Please, we're going to be around for a while. The board members are around. They're always available. Our meetings are third Thursdays of the month. In January, we're going to start having some discussions of these items at each of the board meetings. Please, we'd love to see people come out. And I do want to thank you for coming out. We never know how many we're going to get, but each time I hope you will come out. I hope you will visit the website. Oh, we have a question. Good.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kevin Sullivan. Tonight was a good step, a first good step. How are you and the board and everybody, how are you going to sell this? I understand the importance, but quite frankly, I'm very surprised that this place is not crowded. I really am. I understand tonight the weather and everything, but this is something that our district has needed for some time. And I hear the negativity about taxes, and we can all agree with that. How are you going to sell it? Is there a plan formulated to go to the community and say, listen, this is the time that we need to do something. And without our participation in the community, this is not going to happen. So I'm curious to see if there's a plan being formulated, how you're going to sell it.
I think that's one of the most problematic pieces for school districts. And the reason being is we can develop a plan, the board can approve a plan, but I'm not allowed to sell anything. If I show favoritism one way or another, and that can be hard to do when you're in this position, it is a violation of New York State education law. The board can't even do that. We can only discuss, and really the sell is for the people that are motivated to do the selling. But I think what you also mean is, how are we going to communicate to individuals to make sure that they understand, if ever there's a vote, that they go in and vote the best interest of themselves or the community. I think a lot of that is through the plan of getting these type of meetings will happen much more frequently, and also having relevant information of what actually we're going to start looking at doing, and making sure that we stick to being open and honest. And when we say we're going to do something, that's been my experience, you make sure you do it. I've been a superintendent of a district that, in a couple districts, that before I got there, they said they were going to do this, and then they got approval, and then they went and did that. You've got to have trust, and you have to build that trust. I'm very proud of my record that when we say we're going to do that, I was talking, I think, to Chad and Mike when he got back just before this, and I said, one of the things we did is, in one of my last projects, I put up 115 items that ended up totaling about, I think it was $14 million. But we said those items are gonna get done. We had probably 250 items, and we said, we're gonna try to get as many of these done as possible. People started seeing the value of why we were doing that, but we were guaranteeing that no matter what, these were gonna be done, and if we had to cut, it came out of this side. I think those discussions happen later, and the more we get people to be out there talking about saying, come on out, I think you start to see auditoriums start to fill. But I will tell you, the last district I was in was this size. This is about the size of the audience that we always got. That's the hard part, because like right now, that's why I'm proud, because I didn't know what to expect tonight. This is my first time looking at this. But we have a basketball game in Ithaca. We have a basketball game here. Right after I get done, I've got to go to the middle school. We have other activities going on in the district as well. We have commitments all over. So there's never, I mean, if you look at our district calendar, there's never one night to get everybody together. But our record is to be as consistent and as transparent. And that's why if you weren't here and you are unable to come to the next one, the selling point for me is that if people understand that we're being open and honest and we deliver exactly what we say and we keep saying the same things and we address your questions, that's where people start to understand. Remember, this district voted down a merger by 82%, and it was the largest ever vote total for any action in the district. And people were absolutely dead silent on it. But we feel we were communicating. We put stuff up on the website. People told us that they were paying attention. Those are the things I think that you put together the plan. We don't have I mean, you have to develop your roadmap a little, and it has to be able to sort of flex as you go through because different things come up. But my envisionment is that we're going to start having meetings where the Board of Education is sitting up here. The architects are starting to present why they need to do this. Our facility director and I are off to the side just listening and guiding, but the community is listening and then they're responding to them. And then we're taking notes on how we can best manipulate a situation to help people understand the information that people are talking about in the meetings. Because that information that comes at those meetings and putting out is critical for everyone to hear. But it's really who sells it. It's the word of mouth of those people that participate. Okay.
Can I make a couple comments?
Sure, please. Can you take that mic
So
or
again,
come up?
I'm Pam Stroll. I'm the current president of the board, and this is my 9th year on the board. So thank you, first of all, to all of you for coming this evening, given the weather and the other activities in the district and commitments that you have. To make them a commitment to come here is really important to us. I just wanted to add a couple other comments relative to your last question. And while Dr. Douglas is correct in terms of how we're going to sell it and who does that, I think what we've shown since I've been a district resident for the past 26 years is involvement of the community. So the other studies we've done, we've really tried to identify the various stakeholder groups that we have in our community. You saw some of them listed on the slide. And we've really gone out and sought to populate committees that can be involved to represent all of those different groups in the community. I would expect we would do that again in some way. And he said, sign up out in the hallway, and we still have to kind of formulate our plan. But one way is to make sure not only are we communicating out to those various groups, but we're drawing involvement in from those various groups to be involved in the process and to provide input. And I think that's critical. And second, he alluded to the fact about a communication plan and a communication strategy. We've started working on that ourselves. Hunt also has a representative that has done that for other districts. So it's very important to get the information out in various formats that people are going to want to look at. To have physical meetings, not only here on our property, but out as various groups in the community, to again talk to those different stakeholder groups, to get input, to communicate what's going on, to use the newsletter, to use the internet, to use other vehicles at our disposal, to get the information out there and to get input coming in. And so I would expect that's what you would see throughout the process. And that educational and facilities component being intermingled is absolutely positively critical. As you know, there's all kinds of studies out there relative to space and the way children learn. It's a lot different than what we see in our classrooms today and the environments in which we learn. In terms of having different types of spaces in a continuous space where kids can work independently, in small groups, in conference room settings, in soft seating, on the floor, to be able to do team-based, project-based learning, distance learning, interact with communities, interact with professionals. All that kind of stuff is of increasing importance to make sure that our students are career ready, as Dr. Douglas would say, either to go on and continue their education or get out into the workforce. And so our facilities and buildings have to be in that state to provide that best possible learning environment for our kids to carry them forward where they need to be. So thank you again for coming, and we look forward to your input and your involvement as we work through this process.
Thank you, Ms. Stroll. One of the things she mentioned is Sue Perizzolo has, I think, the sheet where she can sign you up by your name, your email address, and phone number. The reason being, she would probably ask you, are you more interested on the educational side of the committees, the infrastructure side of the committee and discussions, or both? It's important for us because we also want to try to reach out to as many people and involve them. So if you have time, please come down to, I'm going to ask for that piece. Come down.
The sign-up sheet
You want
on the
to?
table.
Okay, they're out there. So they're out there on the table. I didn't see them coming in, so. But if you could, please, if we have any questions that we can answer for you one-on-one, please let us know. And anytime you ask us a question, we won't put your name to it, but we will add those questions. If you do not have time tonight and you want to send them to us by email, please just go onto the website, click on my name or click on Sue's name in the email contacts, and that way we can try to get that information up. But I do want to truly thank you. It's been about an hour and 10 minutes. I appreciate your time and patience, and we will really shift this in the new year to start moving ahead with the project development and educational discussions as quickly as possible. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time for the betterment of Horseheads Central School.
settings, in soft seating, on the floor, to be able to do team-based, project-based learning, distance learning, interact with communities, interact with professionals. All that kind of stuff is of increasing importance to make sure that our students are career ready, as Dr. Douglas would say, either to go on and continue their education or get out into the workforce. And so our facilities and buildings have to be in that state to provide that best possible learning environment for our kids to carry them forward where they need to be. So thank you again for coming, and we look forward to your input and your involvement as we work through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. One of the things she mentioned is Sue Perizzolo has, I think, the sheet where she can sign you up by your name, your email address, and phone number. The reason being, she would probably ask you, are you more interested on the educational side of the committees, the infrastructure side of the committee and discussions, or both? It's important for us because we also want to try to reach out to as many people and involve them. So if you have time, please come down to, I'm going to ask for that piece. Come down.
The sign-up sheets
You want
are on the table.
to? Okay, they're out there. So they're out there on the table. I didn't see them coming in. So, but if you could, please, if we have any questions that we can answer for you one-on-one, please let us know. And anytime you ask us a question, we won't put your name to it, but we will add those questions. If you do not have time tonight and you want to send them to us by email, please just go onto the website, click on my name or click on Sue's name in the email contacts, and that way we can try to get that information up. But I do want to truly thank you. It's been about an hour and 10 minutes. I appreciate your time and patience, and we will really shift this in the new year to start moving ahead with the project development and educational discussions as quickly as possible. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time for the betterment of Horseheads Central School.